On a bright Tuesday morning in March 2005, in the quiet, suburban town of Tracy, California, a young mother named Sarah Mitchell vanished without a trace from her own driveway. Her husband, Daniel Mitchell, reported her missing at 5:47 in the evening, nearly 9 hours after he claimed she had left for a routine grocery shopping trip. Their 2 children, Emma, age 7, and Jacob, age 4, waited inside the house with their grandmother while investigators combed through the first confusing hours of what would become one of San Joaquin County's most baffling disappearances. The family appeared devastated. The community rallied. Search parties formed before sunset. Yet from those very first hours, something felt wrong to the deputies who responded to that call. Why had Daniel Mitchell waited so long to report his wife missing? Where was her car? And why did the children seem so quiet, so still, so carefully distant from their father? The question that would echo through 15 years of investigation was simple but terrible. What happened to Sarah Mitchell between 8:30 that Tuesday morning and the moment her husband finally picked up the phone? Tracy, California sits in the Central Valley, roughly 60 miles east of San Francisco, a place where commuter families sought affordable homes and good schools away from the coastal sprawl. In 2005, the town held just over 70,000 residents, characterized by neat subdivisions with Spanish tile roofs, newly planted trees struggling in the heat, and streets named after flowers and precious stones. The Mitchell family lived on Ambercrest Drive, a curving residential street where American flags hung from porch columns and basketball hoops stood sentinel in driveways.
Daniel Mitchell was 34. He stood 6 feet tall with a stocky build, dark hair starting to thin at the crown, and a tendency toward plaid button-down shirts even in warm weather. Neighbors described him as cordial but reserved, the kind of man who waved from his car but rarely stopped to chat. He coached Emma's soccer team on weekends. He mowed the lawn every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. He kept his work boots lined up by the garage door in his truck, a white Ford F-150, parked in the driveway because Sarah's car occupied the garage. The morning of March 15, 2005 began unremarkably. The sky held that particular pale blue common to Central Valley mornings before the heat settled in. A neighbor, Rita Valdez, recalled hearing the Mitchell garage door open at 8:03 a.m., the mechanical hum carrying through the quiet subdivision. She glanced out her kitchen window and saw Sarah backing the Honda down the driveway. Sarah wore a blue sweater. Rita remembered this detail specifically because she had thought about borrowing a similar sweater pattern from Sarah, who sometimes knitted while waiting for Emma at school pickup. Clears throat. Emma Mitchell attended school that day. Her teacher, Mrs. Patricia Chen, marked her present at 8:22 a.m. Emma participated normally in morning circle time. She worked on her math worksheet. She ate the turkey sandwich from her lunchbox. She did not mention anything unusual. She did not appear distressed. At 2:45 p.m., when the dismissal bell rang, Emma walked to the pickup area and waited. Her father arrived at 2:53 p.m. in his white truck, slightly later than usual. Mrs. Chen noted this only because Sarah typically arrived at 2:48 p.m. exactly, and the change in routine struck her as mildly noteworthy. Daniel Mitchell told his daughter that her mother had errands to run. They picked up Jacob from Little Learners Preschool at 3:15 p.m. The preschool director, Monica Alvarez, later recalled that Daniel seemed normal, maybe a little rushed. He signed Jacob out on the daily log. He buckled the boy into his car seat. He drove home. According to Daniel's later statements to investigators, he became concerned when Sarah had not returned by 4:30 p.m. He called her cell phone. It went directly to voicemail. He called the dental office where she worked. The receptionist informed him that Sarah had not been scheduled to work that day. He called her mother, Linda Rosenberg, who lived in Modesto, 40 minutes north. Linda had not heard from Sarah since Sunday evening when they had spoken about plans for Easter weekend. Daniel Mitchell stated that he fed the children dinner. He gave them macaroni and cheese from a box. He turned on the television to a cartoon program. He continued calling Sarah's phone every 15 minutes. He did not call the police. He later explained that he assumed she had lost track of time, perhaps stopped to visit a friend, perhaps had car trouble and her phone battery had died. At 5:47 p.m., Daniel Mitchell called the Tracy Police Department to report his wife missing. The first responding officers, Deputy Mark Sandoval and Deputy Jennifer Reyes, arrived at the Amber Crest address at 6:04 p.m. The house appeared orderly. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. The children sat on the living room couch watching television. Emma held a stuffed rabbit in her lap. Jacob sucked his thumb, something Daniel mentioned the boy only did when tired or upset. Daniel Mitchell's mother, Patricia Mitchell, had arrived by this time. She had driven from her home in Manteca after Daniel called her around 5:30 p.m., he explained, asking her to come help with the children while he dealt with the police. Patricia sat in the kitchen, her hands folded on the table. Deputy Reyes noted in her report that the grandmother appeared visibly shaken, tearful, repeatedly asking where Sarah could have gone. Deputy Sandoval walked through the house with Daniel Mitchell. Sarah's purse sat on the bedroom dresser. Her wallet remained inside, containing her driver's license, credit cards, $43 in cash. Her cell phone was not present. Her overnight bag, the small black roller suitcase she used for trips, hung in the bedroom closet. All her clothes appeared to be present. Her medications, prescriptions for hypothyroidism and mild anxiety, sat in the bathroom medicine cabinet. The bottles were full, recently refilled. The garage revealed the first significant detail. Sarah's Honda Accord was gone. The garage stood empty except for tools hanging on pegboards, storage bins stacked against walls, 2 bicycles, and a red plastic wagon. The concrete floor showed oil stains where the Honda typically parked. Daniel explained that Sarah must have taken the car when she left that morning. "When exactly did you last see your wife?" Deputy Sandoval asked. Daniel Mitchell stood in the garage doorway, his hands in his pockets. He stated that he had left for work at 7:30 a.m. that morning. Sarah had been in the kitchen making breakfast for the children. He had kissed her goodbye. She had reminded him to pick up milk on his way home. That was the last time he saw her. "And you didn't think to call us until nearly 6 o'clock?" Deputy Reyes asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Daniel explained again. Sarah sometimes lost track of time. She had mentioned wanting to visit some furniture stores in Livermore, looking for a new dresser for Emma's room. He thought she might have driven out there, perhaps 45 minutes away, and simply stayed longer than planned. "Her car is missing, but her wallet is here," Deputy Sandoval observed. Daniel nodded slowly. He suggested maybe she had cash in her pocket. Maybe she used a credit card he didn't know about. His voice remained steady, measured. He did not raise it. He did not cry. For those who have ever watched someone deliver terrible news with unusual calm, who have noted the absence of the trembling voice or the desperate questions that should accompany fear, the deputies standing in that garage recognized something that could not yet be named. They had no evidence. They had no body. They had no witnesses to any crime. But they had a husband who had waited 9 hours to report his wife missing, and they had 2 children who sat too quietly on a couch, and they had a question forming that could not yet be asked directly. By 6:30 p.m., as the March sun descended and shadows stretched across Amber Crest Drive, the Tracy Police Department had issued a missing person report for Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. Her description went out to all local agencies. White female, 5 feet 4 inches tall, approximately 125 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing a blue sweater and jeans. Driving a 2003 silver Honda Accord, California license plate 4XYZ729. The search for Sarah Mitchell had officially begun. The swing set in the backyard stood motionless in the still evening air. Inside the house, Emma Mitchell drew pictures with crayons while her grandmother watched, and in those pictures, there were houses and trees and a sun in the corner. But there were no people, no mother, no father, just empty spaces where a family should have been. Part 2, the investigation. The search operation commenced at first light on Wednesday, March 16, 2005. Tracy Police Department coordinated with San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office to deploy ground teams throughout a 10-mile radius surrounding the Mitchell residence. 73 volunteers from the community arrived at the staging area in Jacobson Elementary School parking lot by 7:00 a.m. They wore neon safety vests. They carried water bottles and walking sticks. They moved in organized lines through vacant lots, drainage ditches, parks, and the edges of farmland that bordered the suburban sprawl. Linda Rosenberg, Sarah's mother, stood before the news cameras that morning. Her face showed the peculiar pallor of sleeplessness and shock. She clutched a photograph of Sarah, a recent picture from Christmas showing Sarah smiling beside the decorated tree. Linda's voice broke as she spoke. Sarah would never leave her children. Never. Someone please, if you know anything, if you saw anything, please call the police. Please help us bring her home. The local media coverage intensified by afternoon. KOVR Channel 13 from Sacramento sent a news van. The Tracy Press ran a front-page story. Sarah's face appeared on missing person flyers taped to storefront windows, telephone poles, bus stop shelters. The dental office where she worked organized a volunteer search team. Her coworkers described her as reliable, punctual, devoted to her children. Not the kind of woman who would simply drive away from her life. Daniel Mitchell participated in the searches. He walked through the neighborhoods calling Sarah's name. He spoke to reporters on the second day, standing in his driveway with the house visible behind him. Sarah, if you can hear this, please come home. The kids miss you. I miss you. Whatever is wrong, we can work it out. Just please come home. His voice remained steady. His eyes were dry. Investigators noted this. On Thursday, March 17, Detective Laura Brennan took lead on the case. She was 42 years old, a 16-year veteran of the Tracy Police Department with a particular reputation for methodical work on complex cases. She began by constructing a precise timeline of Sarah's last known movements. 8:03 a.m. Neighbor Rita Valdez heard the garage door open. 8:15 a.m. Sarah should have arrived at Jacobson Elementary School to drop off Emma. The school had no record of Sarah's car in the drop-off line that morning. This discrepancy took several days to emerge, but when Mrs. Chen reviewed her notes, she confirmed that Emma had arrived by school bus that morning, not by car with her mother. This detail changed everything. Detective Brennan interviewed Daniel Mitchell again on Friday, March 18. She sat across from him in an interview room at the police station, a small space with gray walls and a table bolted to the floor. Daniel had agreed to come involuntarily. He had not requested a lawyer. He sat with his hands folded, his expression composed. "Walk me through Tuesday morning again," Detective Brennan said, her voice neutral. "Every detail you can remember." Daniel explained that he had woken at 6:30 a.m. He showered, he dressed for work. He went downstairs and found Sarah making breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast. The children were still asleep. He ate quickly. He kissed Sarah goodbye around 7:20 a.m., earlier than he had initially stated. He corrected himself now. He had misremembered the exact time. He left for work. And Sarah was taking Emma to school, Detective Brennan asked. Yes, like always, Daniel said. Did you see Emma that morning before you left? Daniel paused. He stated that he had looked into Emma's room, but she was still sleeping. He had not wanted to wake her. So you didn't actually see Sarah take Emma to school? No, but that was the plan. That's what Sarah did every morning. Detective Brennan made a note. She asked about the previous evening, Monday, March 14. How had Sarah seemed? Had they argued? Had she mentioned plans for Tuesday? Daniel stated that Monday evening had been normal. They ate dinner together. They watched television. Sarah had seemed fine, perhaps a little tired. She had mentioned wanting to organize the garage on Tuesday after dropping Emma at school. She had talked about possibly shopping for a dresser. But her wallet was at home, Detective Brennan observed. I don't know why she didn't take it, Daniel said. His hands remained folded. He did not fidget. Those who have studied interviews with individuals attempting to control information understand the significance of stillness. The way truth tends to leak through small movements, while deception requires the body to lock down, to give nothing away. Detective Brennan watched Daniel Mitchell's absolute composure and felt the cold certainty that she was being lied to, though she could not yet prove what the lie contained. The investigation expanded to cell phone records. Sarah's phone had last pinged off a tower near the Mitchell residence at 7:52 a.m. on Tuesday morning. After that, nothing. The phone was either turned off or destroyed. Detectives obtained records for Daniel's phone as well. His phone showed normal activity throughout Tuesday. He had called his workplace at 8:15 a.m. to report he would be 30 minutes late. He had called a supply vendor at 10:30 a.m. He had called his mother at 12:45 p.m. At 5:47 p.m., he had called 911. Investigators interviewed Daniel's coworkers at the food distribution warehouse. His supervisor, Marcus Webb, confirmed that Daniel had clocked in at 8:47 a.m. on Tuesday, later than his usual 8:00 a.m. start time. When asked about this, Daniel had mentioned traffic on Interstate 205. Marcus noted that Daniel had seemed normal, maybe distracted, but not unusual for a Tuesday. On March 21, 6 days after Sarah's disappearance, a groundskeeper at Parkview Cemetery, 8 miles west of Tracy, discovered a silver Honda Accord parked in a remote section of the cemetery grounds. The license plate matched Sarah Mitchell's vehicle. The car was locked. The interior appeared undisturbed. A forensic team processed the vehicle over the next 2 days. They found no blood, no signs of struggle. Sarah's cell phone was not in the car. The keys were not in the ignition. The gas tank showed 3/4 full. The odometer reading indicated the car had been driven approximately 47 miles since its last oil change 2 weeks earlier. Given Sarah's typical driving patterns, this mileage aligned with normal use, providing no indication of a long drive or unusual trip. The cemetery location troubled investigators. It was not on any logical route from the Mitchell home to shopping areas, grocery stores, or furniture shops. It was not near Sarah's workplace. It was not near any location Sarah regularly visited. Someone had driven that car to the cemetery deliberately, parked it in a section hidden from the main entrance road, and walked away. Detective Brennan returned to the Mitchell house with a search warrant on March 23. She and her team spent 11 hours examining every room. They found no blood evidence, no signs of violence, no hidden safes or secret compartments. They seized Daniel's computer. They collected hair samples from Sarah's brush. They photographed everything. Emma's room, Detective Brennan noticed the drawings taped to the walls. Crayon pictures of houses and trees and stick figures. In several of the pictures, drawn over the past weeks according to dates Emma had written in careful print, the stick figure family showed only 3 people: a girl, a smaller boy, and a taller figure that could have been either parent. The mother figure appeared in some pictures but not others, an inconsistency that troubled Detective Brennan in ways she could not yet articulate. Clear's throat. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves during break times in the investigation. They had worked missing person cases before. They understood the statistics. When a wife disappeared, the husband warranted close scrutiny. But without a body, without witnesses, without physical evidence of a crime, they had only suspicion and Daniel Mitchell's unsettling calmness. The community response remained intense through the end of March. Vigils were held at Tracy Community Park. Sarah's photograph appeared on the evening news across Northern California. Tips flooded the police department hotline. Someone claimed to have seen a silver Honda in Modesto. Someone else reported a woman matching Sarah's description at a gas station in Sacramento. Every lead was investigated. Every tip turned into another dead end. Sarah's dental office coworkers organized a fundraiser for the children. They collected nearly $8,000 to help with expenses. Daniel accepted the money with quiet gratitude. He appeared at the fundraiser with Emma and Jacob, both children dressed neatly, both quiet and well-behaved. Emma held her father's hand. Jacob stayed close to his grandmother, Patricia. By mid-April, the investigation had slowed. Detectives had exhausted the obvious leads. The forensic examination of the Honda had yielded nothing definitive. Cell phone records provided no new information. Bank accounts showed no unusual activity. Sarah's credit cards had not been used since March 14. Her social security number had not appeared in any employment records, rental applications, or financial transactions. Detective Brennan interviewed the children on April 8, with a child psychologist present and Linda Rosenberg in the room. Emma sat in a chair too large for her small frame, her feet not quite reaching the floor. She answered questions in a soft voice. She said her mommy had gone away. She said she missed her mommy. She said her daddy was sad. When asked about the morning her mother disappeared, Emma stated she had ridden the bus to school. She could not remember if she had seen her mother that morning. She was not sure. Everything felt confusing, she said. Jacob, only 4 years old, provided even less information. He played with toy cars while the psychologist asked gentle questions. He said his mommy was sleeping. When asked to clarify, he looked at his grandmother and said nothing more. The case grew cold as spring turned to summer. Detective Brennan continued working other angles, running down rumors and following tenuous leads, but the trail had gone dark. Sarah Mitchell had vanished as completely as if she had never existed, leaving behind only a silver Honda in a cemetery, 2 children with uncertain memories, and a husband whose grief appeared more like careful performance than genuine anguish. The swing set in the backyard of the Amber Crest house moved gently in the breeze, chains creaking, the seat empty. Inside, Daniel Mitchell maintained his routines with mechanical precision. He worked his shifts. He coached soccer. He attended parent-teacher conferences. To all outward appearances, he was a devoted single father doing his best under terrible circumstances. But those who watched carefully, those who noticed the way Emma sometimes flinched when he raised his voice, or the way Jacob never quite met his father's eyes, they wondered what secrets lived behind the walls of that house on Amber Crest Drive. Part 3: The Silence. 18 months passed. The seasons turned. Summer heat gave way to autumn rains, then winter fog settling thick over the Central Valley. The missing person posters of Sarah Mitchell faded on telephone poles, bleached by sun and torn by wind until they peeled away completely. The news van stopped coming. The volunteers moved on to other causes. The case file for Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell remained open but dormant, one folder among many in Detective Brennan's filing cabinet. Daniel Mitchell continued living in the house on Amber Crest Drive. He maintained the lawn. He trimmed the hedges. He painted the front door a fresh shade of blue in the spring of 2006. To the neighbors who still lived on that curving street, he appeared to be managing as well as could be expected. He had declined interviews with the media after the first few months. He had asked, through a brief statement to the Tracy Press, for privacy to grieve with his children. Linda Rosenberg visited every Sunday. She arrived at noon and stayed until evening. She brought groceries. She cooked meals that Daniel placed in the freezer. She played with Emma and Jacob, taking them to parks, reading them books, trying to fill the empty space where her daughter should have been. Linda had aged visibly in those 18 months. Her hair had gone almost completely gray. She moved with the careful slowness of someone carrying an invisible weight. Emma turned 9 years old in July 2006. She had grown quieter over the months following her mother's disappearance. Her second-grade teacher, Mr. Ramon Torres, noted in a conference with Daniel that Emma seemed withdrawn, reluctant to participate in class discussions, often staring out the window during lessons. Her grades remained adequate but showed none of the enthusiasm she had displayed in earlier years. When asked to write a story about her family for a class assignment, Emma wrote 3 sentences. "I live with my dad and my brother. We have a dog now. His name is Max." Jacob, now 5 and attending kindergarten, exhibited different signs of the trauma that lived unspoken in that house. He had nightmares. Patricia Mitchell, who stayed overnight several times a month to help Daniel with childcare, reported that Jacob would wake screaming, calling for his mother, inconsolable for 30 or 40 minutes before exhausting himself back to sleep. Daniel explained to the pediatrician that the boy was struggling with the absence, with the not knowing. The doctor recommended therapy. Daniel agreed, but never scheduled appointments. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the terrible dissonance between what you want to believe and what you suspect might be true, the extended Mitchell family existed in this state of suspended certainty. Patricia Mitchell defended her son absolutely. She told anyone who asked that Daniel was innocent, that he was a good father, that he had nothing to do with Sarah's disappearance. She believed this with a conviction that allowed no room for questions. Linda Rosenberg existed in a different reality. She could not say aloud what she suspected. She had no proof. She had only a mother's instinct and the accumulation of small details that did not align properly. She noticed how Daniel controlled every aspect of the children's lives, dictating their schedules with rigid precision. She noticed how he discouraged the children from talking about their mother, changing the subject quickly when Sarah's name arose. She noticed the way Emma would start to say something, then glance at her father and stop mid-sentence, the words dying unspoken. In October 2006, Linda hired a private investigator, a retired police officer named Robert Chen who operated independently out of Stockton. She paid him with money from her retirement savings. She asked him to review everything the police had examined, to look for anything they might have missed. Robert Chen spent 6 weeks on the case. He interviewed neighbors again. He drove the route from the Mitchell house to the cemetery multiple times, timing the journey. He examined satellite photos of the area from March 2005. He found nothing new. The trail had gone completely cold. By the end of 2006, Daniel Mitchell had begun dating. Her name was Angela Cortez, a 30-year-old accountant who worked in Livermore. They had met at a work conference in Sacramento. Angela was kind, soft-spoken, optimistic in ways that suggested she had not yet encountered the darker possibilities of human nature. She visited the house on Ambercrest Drive cautiously at first, then more regularly. She brought books for the children. She baked cookies with Emma. Daniel seemed lighter when Angela was present, less rigid, almost happy. Linda Rosenberg watched this development with something close to horror. She could not articulate exactly why it disturbed her so deeply, only that her daughter had been missing for less than 2 years, and here was Daniel Mitchell moving forward as if Sarah had never existed. When Linda voiced her concerns to Patricia, Daniel's mother grew angry, defensive. Patricia stated that Daniel deserved happiness, that he could not live in grief forever, that Linda needed to let him heal. The fracture between the two grandmothers widened into an unbridgeable gap. By March 2007, exactly 2 years after Sarah's disappearance, they barely spoke except in terse exchanges about the children's schedule. Emma's drawings changed during this period. The stick figures became more detailed. She drew a house with many rooms. In one room, she drew a figure lying down, colored entirely in blue. When her teacher asked about the drawing, Emma said it was a swimming pool. But there was no pool at the Mitchell house. There never had been. Clear's throat. Jacob's nightmares intensified in the spring of 2007. He began wetting the bed, a regression that concerned his kindergarten teacher enough to file a report with the school counselor. When the counselor, Mrs. Diane Peterson, met with Daniel to discuss the issue, he explained that Jacob was still processing the loss of his mother, that boys sometimes struggled to express difficult emotions, that it would pass with time. Mrs. Peterson, a woman with 28 years of experience working with children in crisis, did not fully accept this explanation. She noted that Jacob seemed afraid of his father in ways that went beyond normal childhood caution. When she asked Jacob directly if he felt safe at home, the boy nodded yes, but his eyes told a different story. She documented her concerns. She contacted Child Protective Services to request a wellness check. A caseworker visited the Mitchell home in April 2007. The caseworker, Thomas Nguyen, found the house clean and organized. The children appeared well-fed, properly dressed, and physically healthy. Emma spoke politely but offered little information. Jacob stayed close to his father throughout the visit. Thomas saw no evidence of physical harm or neglect. He closed the case after one visit, noting that the family was functioning adequately under difficult circumstances. But something shifted in the house after that visit. Daniel became more controlling, according to later testimony from Angela Cortez. He began questioning her about conversations she had with the children. He became irritated when Linda Rosenberg visited, suggesting she was upsetting Emma and Jacob by constantly bringing up their mother. He proposed that Linda reduce her visits to once a month instead of every week. Linda refused. She threatened to seek legal counsel to establish grandparent visitation rights. Daniel backed down, but the tension settled permanently into their interactions, a brittle civility that could shatter at any provocation. Angela Cortez began to notice inconsistencies in Daniel's stories. He had told her that Sarah had left one morning without explanation, that he had assumed she was running errands and did not realize anything was wrong until hours later. But in a moment of carelessness, Emma mentioned to Angela that her mother had left very early before breakfast, before Emma woke up. When Angela asked Daniel about this discrepancy, he became defensive. He said Emma was confused, that trauma could distort memories, especially in children. He asked Angela not to interrogate his daughter about painful subjects. Angela apologized. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to build a life with this man and these children. But doubt, once planted, grows in dark soil. In November 2007, nearly 3 years after Sarah's disappearance, Angela Cortez moved into the house on Ambercrest Drive. Daniel had proposed marriage in October. She had accepted, though some part of her remained uncertain, hesitant, troubled by feelings she could not name. The wedding was scheduled for June 2008. Emma would be the flower girl. Jacob would carry the rings. Linda Rosenberg did not attend the engagement party. She sent a card with a check for the children. She called Emma on her 10th birthday in July 2008 and heard a hollowness in her granddaughter's voice that broke her heart. She called every week, speaking to Emma and Jacob when Daniel permitted it, which became less and less frequent as the wedding date approached. The wedding took place on June 14, 2008. It was a small ceremony at a garden venue in Livermore. 43 guests attended. Emma wore a white dress and scattered rose petals down the aisle with mechanical precision. Jacob dropped the rings twice, his hands shaking. Patricia Mitchell cried during the vows. Linda Rosenberg was not invited. For those who have watched a family fracture along fault lines of suspicion and unspoken truth, who have seen the way silence can calcify into permanent division, the Mitchell family had become a study in surfaces. To outsiders, they appeared to be healing, moving forward, building a new normal. But inside the house on Ambercrest Drive, where Emma drew her careful pictures and Jacob woke from nightmares he could not explain, the truth waited patiently for the moment when it could no longer be contained. The swing set in the backyard rusted slowly. No one used it anymore. The chains had grown stiff. The seat hung crooked, one side higher than the other. Daniel had promised to take it down, to haul it away, to clear that corner of the yard for something new. But the swing remained, a monument to what had been lost, what had been taken, what had been buried beneath layers of careful lies and forced normalcy. Part 4. The Revelation. The unraveling began quietly, as these things often do, with a single sentence spoken by a child who had carried the weight of knowledge for too long. In September 2019, 14 years after Sarah Mitchell's disappearance, Emma Mitchell was 22 years old. She had graduated from California State University, Stanislaus, with a degree in social work. She lived in an apartment in Turlock with 2 roommates. She had distanced herself from her father gradually over the years since turning 18, seeing him perhaps 4 or 5 times a year, speaking on the phone less frequently still. She was in therapy, working through trauma she could not fully articulate even to herself. Jacob, now 18 and enrolled at Delta College in Stockton, had moved in with Linda Rosenberg after a particularly explosive argument with his father in March 2019. He was studying automotive technology. He was trying, in his own way, to build a life separate from the shadow that had defined his childhood. On September 12, 2019, Emma Mitchell walked into the Tracy Police Department and asked to speak with someone about her mother's case. The desk sergeant, not recognizing the name immediately, asked her to wait. He pulled up the case file. He saw it had been cold for over a decade. He called Detective Laura Brennan, who had since been promoted to sergeant but maintained an interest in unsolved cases, particularly this one. Detective Brennan met with Emma in an interview room similar to the one where she had questioned Daniel Mitchell 14 years earlier. Emma sat with her hands folded in her lap. She was thin, with long dark hair and her mother's brown eyes. She looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "I need to tell you something," Emma said. Her voice shook. "I need to tell you what I remember from that morning." Detective Brennan set her recorder on the table. She read Emma her rights, even though Emma was not a suspect, to ensure everything said would be admissible. Emma nodded understanding. She took a breath. "I was 7 years old," Emma began. "I remember waking up early that morning, March 15. It was still dark outside. I heard my parents fighting downstairs. They were arguing about money, about my dad wanting to buy a new truck, about my mom saying they couldn't afford it. I heard my mom say she wanted to leave, that she couldn't do this anymore. I heard my dad say she wasn't going anywhere. Emma paused. Tears streamed down her face. Detective Brennan waited. I heard sounds, loud sounds, thumping, my mom screaming, then stopping. I stayed in my bed. I was so scared. I pulled the covers over my head. After a while, it got quiet. I heard my dad's truck start. I looked out my window and saw him driving away. It was starting to get light by then, maybe 6:30 or 7. I waited in my room. I was too afraid to go downstairs. Clears throat. Emma wiped her eyes with a tissue Detective Brennan handed her. She continued. When my dad came back, maybe an hour later, he came to my room. He was very calm. He told me that my mom had left, that she had gone away for a while, that I should get dressed because I needed to catch the school bus. He said if anyone asked, I should say my mom was fine when he left for work. He made me promise not to talk about hearing them fight. He said it would make everything worse if I told. He said they would take me and Jacob away if I said anything. I believed him. I was 7. The interview lasted 2 hours. Emma provided every detail she could recall. She described hearing what sounded like something being dragged. She described the smell of cleaning products when she finally came downstairs later that morning. She described how her father had seemed different after that day, more controlled, more careful, watching everything she and Jacob said and did. Detective Brennan asked why Emma had waited 14 years to come forward. Emma explained the fear, the manipulation, the way her father had convinced her she was protecting her brother by staying silent. She explained that starting therapy had helped her understand the truth of what she had witnessed. She explained that she could not carry the secret anymore. I think my dad killed my mom, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think he buried her somewhere, and I think he has been lying about it for 14 years. The investigation reopened officially on September 13, 2019. Detective Brennan assembled a task force including the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office and California Department of Justice. They obtained new search warrants for the Amber Crest Drive property, though Daniel and Angela no longer lived there, having moved to Manteca in 2015. The forensic team that descended on the house in late September 2019 brought ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and luminol testing equipment. They examined the house systematically. In the garage, luminol revealed blood traces that had been cleaned but not completely eliminated. The amount was minimal but present, particularly near the far wall and along the base of the water heater. They excavated sections of the backyard, focusing on areas the radar suggested had been disturbed. They found nothing in the first 3 days. On the 4th day, September 28, 2019, cadaver dogs alerted strongly to an area beneath where the old swing set had once stood. The swing set had been removed in 2016 when the new owners had renovated the backyard. Excavation at that location revealed disturbed soil approximately 4 feet down. At 4 feet 6 inches, they found a blue tarp. Inside the tarp, wrapped in plastic sheeting, they found human remains. The skull showed trauma consistent with blunt force. The dental records matched Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. On October 1, 2019 at 6:47 a.m., officers from Tracy Police Department and San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office arrested Daniel Mitchell at his home in Manteca. He was charged with murder in the 1st degree, with special circumstances of lying in wait. He did not resist. He did not speak. He requested an attorney. The arrest made national news. Sarah's case had been largely forgotten outside of Tracy, but the resolution, 14 years later, triggered widespread media coverage. CNN ran a segment. People magazine published a feature. The story contained all the elements that captured public attention: the missing mother, the patient husband, the children who had known the truth and been silenced by fear. Angela Cortez filed for divorce 3 days after the arrest. She released a statement through her attorney expressing shock and betrayal. She stated she had believed Daniel's account of Sarah's disappearance, that she had trusted him completely, that she was devastated to learn the truth. She moved out of their shared home and returned to her maiden name. Jacob Mitchell, when interviewed by Detective Brennan, provided his own account. He had been only 4 years old at the time of his mother's death, too young to remember details clearly. But he recalled nightmares of his mother calling for help, of darkness and cold earth. He recalled his father telling him repeatedly that his mother had left because she did not love them enough to stay. He recalled believing this for years, internalizing the abandonment, until Emma finally told him the truth in the summer of 2019. Linda Rosenberg attended every day of the preliminary hearings. She sat in the front row of the courtroom, her face composed, her hands folded in her lap. When the judge ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, Linda closed her eyes briefly, then opened them and looked directly at Daniel Mitchell in his orange jail jumpsuit. He did not meet her gaze. The trial commenced in March 2020, 15 years to the month after Sarah's murder. The prosecution presented a methodical case. They detailed Daniel's financial troubles in early 2005, credit card debt approaching $40,000, a loan application for a new truck that Sarah had refused to co-sign. They presented testimony from neighbors who had heard arguments from the Mitchell house in the weeks before Sarah's disappearance. They presented forensic evidence from the garage, the luminol results, the blood traces. They presented Emma Mitchell's testimony. She sat on the witness stand for 6 hours over 2 days, recounting what she had heard that morning, what she had been told, how she had lived with the knowledge for 14 years. The defense attorney, Marcus Feldman, attempted to discredit her memory, suggesting that a 7-year-old child could not reliably recall events from so long ago, that therapy might have implanted false memories, that Emma's account was influenced by years of speculation and family discord. Emma remained steady. She stated clearly, "I know what I heard. I have known for 14 years. I was too frightened to say it, but I have always known." The defense presented an alternative theory, suggesting Sarah had left voluntarily and that someone else had killed her later, returning her body to the property. This theory required significant leaps of logic and lacked supporting evidence. The jury appeared unconvinced. Daniel Mitchell did not testify. He sat at the defense table throughout the trial, his expression unchanged, his posture erect. Those who had known him in 2005 said he looked older, grayer, but otherwise much the same careful control, the same refusal to show emotion. On April 3, 2020, after deliberating for 11 hours across 2 days, the jury returned a verdict, guilty of murder in the first degree. The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs. Linda Rosenberg covered her face with her hands. Emma and Jacob sat together, holding hands, tears streaming down their faces. At sentencing 3 weeks later, Linda Rosenberg addressed the court. She spoke directly to Daniel Mitchell. "You took my daughter from this world. You took her from her children. You made those children live with the horror of knowing what you did. You have shown no remorse, no humanity, no acknowledgement of the evil you committed. I hope you spend every day of the rest of your life remembering what you did, and I hope it destroys you the way you destroyed my family." Daniel Mitchell received a sentence of 25 years to life in state prison. He showed no reaction when the sentence was announced. He was led from the courtroom in shackles. He has filed an appeal, which remains pending as of January 2026. Closing. The house on Ambercrest Drive has changed hands twice since the arrest. The current owners, unaware of its history when they purchased the property, learned about Sarah Mitchell's burial only after closing escrow. They have considered moving but have remained, determined not to let the past define their home. They planted a garden where the swing set once stood, flowers that bloom in the spring, a quiet memorial to a life that should have been lived. Emma Mitchell now works as a victim advocate, helping others find their voice when silence seems safer than truth. Jacob Mitchell completed his degree and operates an auto repair shop in Modesto. They remain close, bound by shared trauma and the difficult courage it took to finally speak. Linda Rosenberg, now 78 years old, keeps a photograph of Sarah on her mantle, taken on a vacation to Lake Tahoe in 2004, months before the end. In the photograph, Sarah smiles at the camera, her hair windblown, her eyes bright, alive in a moment that cannot be reclaimed but will never be forgotten. The case of Sarah Mitchell stands as a reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, carries its own weight and gravity. It pulls at those who know it, presses against the walls of silence, and waits with the patience of stone for the moment when it can no longer be denied. For 14 years, 2 children carried knowledge that should never have been theirs to bear. For 14 years, a man moved through the world believing he had committed the perfect crime. But there is no such thing as perfect silence, no lie that can survive the eventual reckoning of conscience. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell was 31 years old when she died. She loved her children. She made them breakfast and drove them to school and planned for their futures. She deserved to watch them grow up. She deserved a life that extended beyond that terrible morning in March 2005. The justice that finally came, though late, ensures her story will not be forgotten, that her memory exists beyond the shadow of the crime that took her. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard, carrying a truth too heavy to hold alone, hoping that speaking it aloud might finally bring the peace that silence never could.